Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Nicole, and today I'm going to be sharing with you what I've recently been reading. Now, as part of this, I'm also going to be sharing with you my borrowing versus buying. So I guess I'll go ahead and cut to that. And if you don't know what that is, that's basically just a little series that I'm doing where I'm trying to more intentionally borrow books from my library. So let's go ahead and go over to that because I'm sure I introduced myself in that as well. Today, I'm coming with episode 2 of my Borrow Instead of Buying series. But the other part of this series and challenge is not only am I borrowing books from the library and reading them, but I'm taking out a certain number of books and I'm giving them all a little test spin initially. And then with you guys, I'm sitting down, I'm reading through 4 of the books for 15 minutes to see if I want to keep reading them. And then I'm going to continue those reads and see if it ends up being a 5-star. Let me show you my little bag of books here. Oops. And what I have ended up picking out. Okay, the first one is this book, The Last and the First by Nina Berberova. And this is a translated work put out by Pushkin Press. I really liked this book because it started with sort of a stranger walks into town and everybody likes him and he stays overnight and leaves. And then the stranger walks into town a year later, but he's blind or mostly blind and being led by a young girl, I think. And he has a slash across his face and nobody knows why or what happened. And I don't either, and I want to find out. So that got me to put this as my number one choice. I think this is going to be the book I end up reading, but we'll see if I still feel that way after 15 minutes. The next book I have vague recollections of, and that is Living Pictures. This is put out by New York Review Books. This is also a translated work of fiction. And what do I recall about this book? I think it had something to do with the author traveling and her experience of coming back to Western Europe after spending some time in Eastern Europe. And I really liked the writing style. That's all I remember. Hopefully after reading this for 15 minutes, I'll have more to share. Oh, yes. And then there was this one, The Anniversary. This was like a surprise pick for me. All of these books are books that I had never heard of. I just kind of randomly picked off the bookshelves at my library based on the publisher or the cover or something else that caught my eye. This book is about an author, and she has just gotten a phone call from her editor telling her that she's been nominated for a prominent award. And hasn't even published her book yet. And so she's a bit intimidated by this. I think her husband has always helped her to some extent in her writing career. They go on a cruise. Her husband goes missing or something like that. She has to stay behind and find him. I think her husband was also jealous of her. There may be some murder involved. I'm not sure about that, but it definitely started having some thriller vibes. And this cover kind of gives those vibes as well. So it'll be weird if this ends up being another thriller, because the first book I picked and read was also a thriller. Is the library getting me to be a thriller girly? Maybe not yet, because the next book is A Single Rose by Muriel Barbary. This book, I've also got pretty high hopes. Might be the pick, might be a 5-star read. I really enjoyed the opening of this. This book had a beautiful opening, very atmospheric, very like fairy tale-esque in the way the story was being told. It takes place in I believe in Japan, and I think there's like a tea house involved, and I don't know, it was just very descriptive and beautiful, and I'm looking forward to the story. I have no idea what this story is about. I just had vibes off of like the first page or so that I read. So I am now re-excited about reading all of these books. I have no idea which one I'm going to pick because really and truly all 4 of these, if nothing else, had really good openings to them. So we'll see what I end up with, but they've each got 15 minutes to impress me. So let me get reading and I'll come back one at a time and talk to you about them. And I'm going to go through them, I think, in the order that I showed them to you. Okay, so I finished my section in the first book. I started, like I said I would, with The Last and the First. And yeah, what do I know so far? I feel like not much more than what I told you at the beginning. So we've had a little bit of a conversation. I mean, in all fairness, it's only 15 minutes. How far are you going to get? And it is a smaller book. Like, this is not normal trade paperback size. So I did make it to page 22, but it started on page 9. Um, so yeah, I forgot that one of the things that it did say at the beginning was that on a particular date, 3 events happened that set the stage for this tale, as it says. The third is that the guy walked into town and this time he was blind. And it was the third part that caught my interest the most when I first read the first couple of pages. And that's still the part that's keeping me the most interested. I think the part that's giving me like a little bit of pause is that I feel like all 3 of these things have been like presented as mysteries to solve and things that we're going to like slowly unpack. So I'm definitely getting the sense with all 3 of these storylines that there's going to be quite a bit of like drawing it out. Like, we're not going to just be told who he is or get his backstory. Like, I have the feeling we're going to have to wait the whole book to get his backstory. And that's one of my least favorite ways of like meeting characters, is like the mysterious person who the whole book is a mystery of unpacking them. And if you can't tell, I'm feeling a little less thrilled about that one. So we're going to move on to Living Pictures. And I almost want to say that I have these stacked in the reverse order of how much I think I would like them, but I don't remember anymore. We'll see what I think about this after 15 minutes. Let me get going. Okay, so moved over here because there's like some nice lighting from the setting sun. So change of scenery. And I did pause like my timers so that I could move you over here with me, basically. But Living Pictures. Okay, I have a much better idea of what this book is about. And I'm definitely not going to pick this one. But not because it's bad. It's actually really fascinating. It's just not what I thought. It reads like nonfiction. It reads like a series of little essays that you can kind of see, like the chapter heading there or the heading there. I don't even know if it's technically a chapter heading. And it's interesting because in it, she's just drawing together for you little vignettes of different experiences that she's had. The first little section is called East Estrangement, and she's talking about the estrangement that you feel coming back home after having visited somewhere else. And then she gets into a chapter where she is talking about Leningrad and the difference of different experiences that people have there, the surfaces of walls in Berlin, the subterranean like places that she would visit that people would hide in. For some reason, the little bit that I could see on the back of this book, I thought it was going to be a very different story. So this is probably a book that's for a different time for me. Next, I'm going to go into the anniversary, but let me go ahead and get my next 15 minutes in. Finished the amount that I'm going to read in the anniversary. Sorry, I had to figure out where to put it so that it wouldn't have a horrible glare. And yeah, what are my thoughts on this? Intrigued, interesting. So, like I said, this is about an author. She has just found out that she, like I said, has actually not like just been nominated, but has won an award for a book that hasn't even been published yet. It's due to be published in a couple of months. Her, I think, editor or agent or somebody had sent in the manuscript. for the award, and she's going to win it. But she's been sworn to secrecy, including the fact that she can't even tell her husband. Now, she has decided to tell her sister because her sister's in the book, and she told her agent because it's her agent, and she has to go to the award ceremony so that they have to plan for that. But for her husband, he's not going to find out until, I guess, the news has been released, and partially because their editor's like, he's a gossip, and if you tell him, he's going to tell everyone. So there's already that little bit of secrecy between them that's been set up, and then things are just going on from there. So good setup, reading really easily. I made it into chapter 2, and yeah, I'm kind of interested to see like where things are all going to go, whether or not it truly is going to end up being a thriller, and like what all is going to happen, and if it goes the lines of a thriller, like why? Like, because there's nothing in their relationship yet to suggest that, unless she's an unreliable narrator, which is possible. So I don't know if that's going to be the book choice. It's going to depend on how the last book goes. So clearly, based on what I showed you at the start, the last book is going to be A Single Rose. This is going to have very different vibes. I'm expecting it for all 15 minutes to be like cozy and pretty and lovely and that kind of thing. And we'll see if I'm right on that. And sorry, like I know the sun's getting like kind of weird. I might also need to go close a shade before I start. But either way, last book, 15 more minutes. This is going to be the deciding round for sure. Yeah, no. I don't need 15 minutes to decide on this one. Okay. So here's what happened. I was wrong, first of all, I was right about where this is located. The opening page talks about China, but this book is set in Japan. And I'm realizing that I have the wool pulled over my eyes and that the opening page is not the beginning of the first chapter. It's really just an opening story talking about like ancient Chinese lore that is related to the idea of peonies and flowers that come up in the first chapter. That's not why this is a no for me. The reason it's a no for me is that what I loved in the opening chapter that made it feel like a fairy tale and like just very magical and whimsical, when you get into the main part of the story, which is more contemporary writing, it feels overwritten in like purple prose. It's just very flowery language that I don't like in a contemporary writing setting. And as an example, it says, and this contains no spoilers other than in the writing style, it says, the maple tree punctured the space in which Rose's perceptions were drowning, and she sensed the tree drawing her toward it, her breath responding to its magnetic force, as if it sought to make her body into a shrub with murmuring boughs. No, I don't want that in my story. And it wasn't just that one section. Like that type of writing occurs like in multiple places as you get into the first chapter. So if you liked that sentence, you might like this book. For me, that's one that doesn't even need to go on my TBR. I will say the other two books, Living Pictures and The Last and the First, I will still keep them in mind, but oddly enough, it's the anniversary for the win. Don't ask how this happened. My next round, I may be more intentional about picking a specific genre because I don't want to keep reading thrillers. I'll check back in with you once I have spread some more in the anniversary. Is that the book that you guessed it would be? I didn't. Okay, hello. We're back. It's a different day. Did I remember to film footage and update you as I went in the reading of the anniversary? No, I did not. At this point, I read this book a week or two ago. So let me tell you what my thoughts were upon actually reading this and whether or not I think I made the right choice. Okay, so for starters, now that I've read the entire book, I'm going to use my little notebook here and I'm going to tell you about it. Maybe I'll hold it like this so you can at least pretend that I'm reading off the back of the book, even though I'm definitely not doing that. These are the notes that I took on the book while I was reading it. The anniversary, to refresh your memory in case you have forgotten, because I don't even remember what I filmed in that video, is by Stephanie Bishop. It was published in 2023 and is a work of literary fiction, I would say primarily, but it definitely has like psychological thriller vibes. But I wouldn't go into it for that. I would go more into it knowing that it's literary fiction that's going to feel a little bit like a thriller versus the other way around. This book definitely explores ideas of love, art, rivalry, memory, and truth, and the story writing process. There is actually, for me, unexpectedly, a lot in this book about writing and being a woman and also an author and also married to someone else who is well known in their own career and is a male, and just the different influences and things that become involved in there. I really liked that part of the book, if you can't tell. The things that worked really well for me in this book is that overall, I would say it was a solid book and a solid read. It was well paced. And I really liked the thriller feel that it had and that sort of constant suspension of belief or tension in the reading as well. I thought it made really smart use of the point of view in telling the story. And like I said, I really enjoyed the discussion of what it is like to be a woman author and trying to make your own way and kind of falling in the shadow of a man or men, and particularly your own husband. And that was just really well done in a variety of different ways, but all of the ways felt very cohesive, and I liked that. There were a few things that I disliked about this book. None of them were major. Probably the only thing that I wished was I actually wanted it to be a bit more of a thriller. And I don't know if it's because it's marketed on the back to have more of that sensation. Like, I really thought this book was going to go somewhere different with the thriller vibes than it did. And by the time I got to the end of the book, I was like, I didn't really need this marketed as a thriller, because I feel like it was on the border of being somewhere between exploring like thriller and danger and just grief itself. And I honestly would have rather it just veered towards the grief. But I don't know if that would have felt too typical. Again, I feel like that has to do with like women and writing and like, marketing a book by a woman, like, and how that's going to work out. I don't know enough about that, but I do wonder if that had to do something with how this book was marketed and how they felt like they could sell it and whatever, because it also comes up in the book. So I don't know, it's a little meta in that sense. So, was this a good choice? Did I choose the right book? I don't know if I chose the right book, but I did choose a good book, and I'm happy I chose this one. I ended up giving it 4 stars. I was pleasantly surprised by that. I even kind of feel like maybe I should have given it slightly higher than 4 stars, because I do have to admit that this is a book that I wouldn't mind owning. I'm not gonna like rush out, and I haven't rushed out. I've had a couple of weeks to go to the store where I could have bought it, and I haven't, but it's definitely something that I'm still toying with, because I could almost see myself rereading this book just because the way she handles some of the topics that come up and the way she handles the point of view in the story, I really enjoyed, and I do think it would hold up to a reread. Also, I listened to this entire book on audiobook, and it was a really well done audiobook, and I enjoyed that listening experience. I do tend to enjoy audiobooks that are in the first person, and this entire book was in first person, so that probably helped as well. This book is not part of a series. However, Stephanie Bishop has written other books. I'll put them up on the screen. And both of them, interestingly enough, cover some similar topics and themes and even storylines as this book does. So on the one hand, that makes me go, oh, okay, that's a little bit of the same. But on the other hand, because I did enjoy this book, it does make me curious to kind of try another one of her works. And in all fairness, I may try more of her works before I decide which one I might personally want to own. If you yourself want to know what book this might be like or read other similar books to this, if you've read this one, the other book that I can think of is Pet, which is actually the last book that I read for my borrowing versus buying challenge. So I don't know why I keep up picking up books that end up having thriller vibes. They feel very similar. So if you have read Pet but maybe wanted more of an adult as the protagonist, I would say The Anniversary would be a good choice. Or if you've read The Anniversary and you liked the feel and perspective of this book and want something else like that and don't mind having it from a younger point of view, which did not bother me in Pet, Pet would be a great option for that, I think. I would recommend this book in general to anyone who likes light thrillers or psychological thrillers, like things that aren't really going to scare you, but are going to be sort of atmospheric and tense. I think this is a good book for that. If you like a first-person narrative and like questioning the entire time whether they're unreliable or not, this is a great book. Personally, I will say, in my opinion, I think every first-person narrator is unreliable. So go into it as skeptical as you want. Also, this is a great book for anybody who likes character studies, who likes a lot of tension, and who likes like slow reveals to happen over the course of the book. I think this is great for all of those things, and I think all of those things are really well done in this book. So that is The Anniversary. Sorry if you feel cheated of like an ongoing vlog, but I did read it. The next book I have for you is The Street by Ann Petry, or at least this is the next book that I read, whether I have it for you or not. I don't even know what that would mean. This was published in 1946 and tells the story of Ludi Johnson. It is basically a work of like post-Harlem Renaissance age, and I would say explores a very popular theme at that time, which is the African-American experience in the US in the 1940s. This book is set basically during the time period that it was written, but I think has a lot in it that is still very relevant today. Ludi Johnson, she is a recently single woman, mother of an 8-year-old son, Bub, and this story is about her fight against what she calls the street. And I love the wordplay and the symbolism and everything that ends up being involved in that title and in just that entire storyline and theme. And it really is a story of survival and just a mother trying to raise her son against all the odds. And I love the idea that it talks about how this isn't just this particular street in New York City in Harlem, but it really could be any street in any city, and I would argue in any time. This book discusses the African American experience and the reality of life in inner city New York City in the late 1940s, but as well just inner city life in most US cities during this time, particularly in the North. It explores themes of racism, also discusses the dangers and hopes and disappointments that people and African Americans during this time period experience. And it also discusses the reality of trying to make a living and survive in a world and place that really doesn't seem to want you. There were quite a few highs in this book for me, particularly the setting and the world building. This book is extremely atmospheric, and I was not expecting that. But Ann Petry does such an amazing job when she sets you in a location in this book that you really feel like you are there witnessing all of it happen. It is dark and eerie and creepy and cold a lot of the time. It's definitely a book that works well in the wintertime. I liked the way she handled the characters' points of view and sort of the first person narration that you experience through quite a bit of the book. She really puts you in the mind of her characters, and it really draws you in closely to this story. You're not just seeing what is happening to them, you are experiencing what is happening to them. And I think that is so important when it comes to her themes and messages in this book. It's very clear to me that Ann Petry wanted you to not just know what this struggle was like or to witness it, but to actually experience it for yourself. And she talks about how too frequently people don't understand what other people's lives are like because they are just seeing it from afar and not able to actually understand the experience themselves. And in doing all of that, I feel like Ann Petry really gets you not to just experience what inner city life is like, but she also busts, I think, a lot of myths about life in the inner city and the struggles that African Americans experience. And I think these are myths that still exist today, which is why I think this book is still really relevant to a modern audience. If there were any lows for me in reading this book, I would say that it could get very heavy at times because the topics she brings up and the situations that happen in the book are very heavy. There is also on-page violence that can get kind of graphic, and that was just something that made it hard to read. It's not something that I would avoid reading because of that, because I think it's there for a point and a purpose, but it is something that's worth knowing about and maybe looking up content warnings if that's something that bothers you. I ended up giving this book 4.5 stars. I think for most people, it would probably be a 5-star book, but really the 4.5 is there for me personally because my personal preference is not to have like on-page graphic violence described. And so I really rated it publicly 4.5 stars because on Storygraph, that's where I go to look back to see how I think about a book and know whether or not I would want to reread it. And that to me is a warning that like, hey, there's something you should, watch out for in reading this. But to be honest, and in all fairness, I may change that rating to 5 stars and just list in the comments that there's a content warning, because that's all it really is for me. Other than that, this book really is a 5-star read. I would reread it, but it would have to be a thoughtful reread for me. I would recommend this book to anyone who is curious about life in any city or living on the streets or living in a more dangerous neighborhood, anyone who's curious about the African American experience in the US, particularly in the 1940s. Also, if you just like historical fiction and you like character studies, or you like books that are historical fiction that focus on particular experiences of people in a particular time and place, this is a really good book for that. There are a lot of books that I think of when I think of this book. I think if you liked the book A Tree Grows in Brooklyn, this has a similar feel to it in terms of experiencing life in a time and place. And it's a very similar time, and it's, the same city, just a different part of it. So I think it would make a really good comparative novel to two different people's experiences in a very similar time period. And yeah, I think you get that same first person experience, that kind of thing, but the experiences are wildly different. And I think that is good to know as well. I also think this book reminds me quite a bit of To Kill a Mockingbird, not because the books themselves have a lot in common, but to me, it gets to that idea that's repeated in To Kill a Mockingbird about walking in someone else's shoes. That is exactly what Ann Petry has you do. She has you walk in the shoes of this mother trying to raise her son in the inner city. And let me just warn you, it gets really harsh. The other comparison I would make with this To Kill a Mockingbird is this also feels like to me it would be Tom Robinson's story if he was raised in the North instead of the South. It on that level also reminds me of another book, which is Invisible Man. So those are probably the 3 books that I would say if you liked those books, I could see you also liking this one, and Black Boy by Richard Wright as well. They're all different in a variety of different ways. Invisible Man, I think you are a little bit more distant from the experience because that is told in second person. This is told in first person. Black Boy is a lot more like sort of different accounts because it's a memoir or a biography, where again, this is a fictional story. So this is a lot more symbolic, like Invisible Man is, but I think gets into a lot of the nitty gritty details like Black Boy does. So those are like 4 other books that I would either recommend reading if you liked this one, or if you've read one of those and enjoyed it. This is something that I feel like falls in that same line, and you may find that this is another good read for you. Ann Petry has written quite a few other works. If I read another book by her, probably the next one I would read is actually a young adult novel she wrote called Tituba of Salem Village. And as the name would imply, if you know anything about Salem, it is about an African American woman set during the time period of the Salem witch trials. So you can imagine where that story might go. Oh, and before I forget, two other books that this book kind of reminded me of and that you might want to keep in mind, depending on aspects of stories that you like, are Bleak House and Rebecca. But it reminds me of both of those books in terms of all of them being very atmospheric, especially in their opening. In Bleak House, it opens with this repeated mention of fog, and fog is this ongoing motif throughout the book. This book opens with repeated mentions of wind, and the wind continues to be a motif throughout the book, as does the weather in general. And then this entire book is atmospheric in a similar way to Rebecca. So again, if you've read either of those two books and enjoyed them, even though the topics and themes discussed are not the same, if you liked the atmosphere in those books, you will probably find this similarly atmospheric. And again, if you liked the atmospheric feel of this book, you might want to check what those two books are about, because you may enjoy one of or the other of them for the same reason. So that is The Street by Ann Petry. Okay, and then the third and final book I have to talk about today is Sunward, book that I kept forgetting I needed to read this month, and I did read it. I'm talking to you about it in December, but I did meet my reading goal, which was to read it before the end of November so that it could count towards my Herkied September new release. Yep. And I did make it. Sunward is by William Alexander, and it was just released in September of this year. So that's why it counts as a new release for September. I had 60 days to read it, and I got it within those 60 days. And it is William Alexander's debut novel in adventure science fiction. So as far as I could tell, William Alexander has written other books, but they are all short stories. So I believe this is his first novel. That was my understanding based on what I looked up. Anyway, like I said, this book is a work of adventure sci-fi that I would say leans more towards like the cozy side. It is about Captain Tova Lear, and she has chosen a life as a courier versus a life in politics with the rest of her family. Over the course of her life, she has become a mentor to juvenile AI, and so she occasionally has robot companions that she has raised from their infancy, if you will, to full maturation or adulthood. And she finds that this is a life that is not without adventure and is something that she is willing to handle, but it's also a life that's not without its own dangers. So it's not surprising when, towards the beginning of the book, in the blink of an eye, she finds herself facing quite a few challenges as her AI companion, Agatha, who is the current juvenile she is raising, is suddenly in trouble and in danger of losing her own self, basically, and having to be reset. And it is not just Agatha who is in trouble, but all of a sudden she finds that also her former pupils and all bots in general may be at risk. This book was a fast-paced adventure to uncover the truth, save some planets, the bots, and the family that she found along the way. It definitely covers and explores topics surrounding found family, AI, biases against AI, computers, robots, all those types of things, others in general. And it has some discussion about what it means to be sentient. I really have very few or no complaints about this book. It was well paced. It touches on a lot of deeper themes, especially surrounding like family and AI and robots, but it does them without a lot of heaviness to it. Even though there are some stakes involved, it manages to keep the overall tone fairly light, and that's why I say it's like kind of on the cozy side of sci-fi. You do have a bit of a young adult feel, but the voice and the protagonist of the book is an adult, so I think that helps keep the book feeling grounded and allows for more mature themes and not a youngish overall tone, even though there are lots of youth in it. I think it's a book that does a good job of bridging those two gaps. So I think it would be a book that would work anywhere from young adult to new adult, if you consider that a classification, all the way into adult fiction. It was a book that was really good entertainment, but if there was a negative, I would say that it was definitely on the side of soft sci-fi and cozy. And while there were some stakes, they never felt like they were too high. And I hedge on saying that's a negative because I think that just depends on what you want out of your own reading experience. I was just looking for a good book that would be a quick read and something enjoyable, and it was all those things for me. I gave it 4 stars. I thought it was really well done. I will say that I did listen to this entire book on audiobook, and I do find that I tend to rate books slightly lower if they're audiobooks. I would definitely want to reread this book. I actually do want to purchase it, so I would not be surprised if on a reread, if my rating of this went up to like a 4.5. I would recommend this book to anybody who likes cozy sci-fi, especially sci-fi set in space, that has some adventure, that's pretty fast-paced. I would say if you like found families, this is a good book for that. And also if you like robots in your sci-fi and you like charming robots that have like really interesting personalities to them, this is a good book for you. There are no other books in this series. Like I said, this is the first novel from William Alexander that I'm aware of. However, by the end of this book, I really wanted it to be a series, which is rare for me. Like, I would have happily gone on to book 2, not immediately, but if I knew there was a book 2, I would have happily gone out and purchased it along with the original book. I think that there are a lot of other books that are similar to this, but one that I own that I'm looking forward to reading soon is A Long Way to a Small Angry Planet. I think it will have a similar feel based on other works that I've read by Becky Chambers. Well, I say other works, the one other work that I've read by Becky Chambers, which is To Be Taught If Fortunate. And this also reminds me of a book that I did really love that had a robot, and that is The Inevitable. I talked about that book quite frequently, especially of late. And yeah, those are the ones that like jump right to mind in terms of having to do with sentience. I think if you wanted a heavier read or were okay with a heavier read that had to do with space and otherness, I think the Xenogenesis series by Octavia Butler also incorporates a lot of the similar themes, but may feel slightly more adult or like dives into those themes like much more deeply. And so that might be a good place to go if you're looking for something similar, but maybe don't want a cozy or lighthearted feel to it. So, pick your poison, if you will, or your enjoyment, or what have you. So those are the 3 books that I've read. I only have 2 of them here, but I did not forget Sunward. I got it out of the way while I could. So that's it for me today. Let me know what you think if you've read any of these books and enjoyed them yourselves, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye.